If you're a massive fan of all things horror, like myself, you have most certainly heard of and likely hold the name Tom Savini in extremely high regard. His practical effects have brought some of the greatest gore to life on the big screen, and that sort of tangible sense of authenticity that his makeup work creates is so important for a horror film. In this genre, you need realism to create tension and a more immersive experience for your viewer. Film is supposed to make you feel something, and for a horror film, that means it should terrify you. And arguably nobody has done that better through practical effects than the great Tom Savini. So if you are well aware of Mr. Savini's work, brace yourself for a very well-deserved glaze session of the man. But if you're by chance unaware of his phenomenal work, then you're in for quite a treat as I run through his great legacy. Prior to becoming a makeup artist, filmmaker and actor Tom Savini actually served as a combat photographer during the Vietnam War, and in past interviews he's opened up about how shooting images of the damage and carnage of that brutal war was not an easy task by any means. He stated that he tried to think of everything he was taking pictures of as just practical effects, as a sort of way to cope with what he was seeing. And I think dealing with such brutal imagery up close and personal helped to inform Savini's work as an artist, as it certainly increased his ability to recreate said gore with a strong semblance of realism. Following the war, Tom Savini would get his big breakthrough in 1978 when he briefly worked with George A. Romero on the film Martin. For this movie, Savini would create a really great and importantly realistic wristlet scene. And director George A. Romero was impressed to say the least with this effect, and would elect to bring Savini back for Dawn of the Dead later that same year. Now, Night of the Living Dead was really the movie that kicked off George A. Romero's career as a notable director, so getting the chance to head the makeup and practical effects team on the sequel to such a groundbreaking film was a massive deal for Tom Savini's career. And while Night of the Living Dead is a great horror experience and largely started the entire zombie subgenre, at least as we know it today, most people, including myself, believe Dawn of the Dead surpasses it. And a lot of this credit has to go to Tom Savini. The practical effect that has always stood out to me the most in this film is when one of the zombies gets shot by a shotgun and their head just bursts. I mean, just look at that. It is a thing of beauty. But just in general, Dawn is a scarier film than its predecessor, mostly because of the uptick in zombie makeup and gore quality. And this is a leading reason as to why Dawn of the Dead is still seen by many as the quintessential zombie film, even as we approach being 5 decades removed from the release of the movie. Also, as a fun little side note, Tom also plays a motorcycle gang member in this film, and has a great stunt fall from the mall balcony at one point, and props to Savini for being willing to make that leap because I most certainly would not have been. After the success of Dawn of the Dead, Mr. Savini would bring his talents to the slasher subgenre in 1980, as he would head the makeup and effects team for the first Friday the 13th. And as many people likely know, Friday the 13th was made to essentially be a bloodier, gorier version of Halloween. Not to criticize that franchise for beginning on an unoriginal note, because to be fair, it ultimately went on to become more popular than Halloween as a franchise. But if you're going to be a more brutal and vicious version of Halloween, then you need to knock it out of the park when it comes to your gore and practical effects. And they absolutely turned to the right man in Tom Savini. I would argue that Savini's practical effects are pretty easily the most iconic aspect of the first Friday the 13th, the spear kill through the bed being the big standout for me. But if we're being honest, the story is obviously very basic here, and even the big twist reveal of Pamela Voorhees doesn't fully work, because she wasn't a true character in the film until her reveal. So as a murder mystery, it's not all that good if we're gonna keep it a buck. But you know what does work and is quite good in this first film? Tom motherfucking Savini. Following Friday the 13th, Tom Savini would continue his hot run, bringing his signature realistic practical effects to the movies Maniac, The Burning, and The Prowler. And by the mid-1980s, it was safe to say that Savini had already established himself as one of the true greats and pioneers of his craft. and he would go on to make a triumphant return to the Friday franchise in 1984, to once again, and for the final time, deliver some wonderfully brutal Friday death scenes, and to kill Jason off for good. Now, it only took a few years for the studio to decide to bring Jason back from the dead, but the death scene of Jason slowly sliding down the machete at the end of Friday the Final Chapter is absolutely hideously gorgeous. I think it is the defining shot and the defining practical effect of that entire film series, and is a huge reason as to why Friday Part 4 is my favorite Jason outing. Honestly, I think there's a great argument that without Tom Savini, the Friday the 13th franchise could have completely flopped. Like, I'm sorry, that first film is not that good. It's a whodunit mystery that doesn't work whatsoever, and is kind of a slog to get through despite being like 90 minutes. And if not for the awesome gore that we get here and there thanks to Mr. Savini, I think there's a decent chance that the franchise fails at film number 1, and we never even get to see an adult Jason on the big screen. The following year in 1985, Savini would make yet another triumphant return, this time to finish off George A. Romero's Of the Dead trilogy, as he would once again collaborate with Romero on Day of the Dead. And while Day of the Dead is certainly a more philosophical and nihilistic film than Dawn of the Dead, it was still a great third installment and helped to solidify the Romero trilogy as one of the best in the history of horror. I might sound like a broken record at this point, but a lot of this credit must go to Tom Savini. In my opinion, the defining moment of Day of the Dead is the death of Private Torres. I mean, just look at the way this zombie rips his head off. That's what I'm talking about. Nobody was pulling shit off like that at this time except for Tom Savini. Zombies should always bring this tangible sense of dread whenever they're done right, and the best way to accomplish that is through well-placed and well-executed carnage. In 1990, Tom Savini would try his hand at directing and would helm a remake of Night of the Living Dead. And honestly, I don't think this movie gets talked about nearly enough. While it doesn't surpass the original in my opinion, and certainly isn't as influential in the zombie subgenre as a whole, it honestly accomplishes everything that a good horror remake should. It tells the story in a way that feels faithful to the franchise, yet also deviates enough to feel distinct and sort of justify its own existence. That's a very difficult tightrope to walk, but I think the 1990 version of The Night of the Living Dead does it quite well. And yet again, seeing more Tom Savini zombie effects on the big screen is never a bad thing. I know I briefly touched upon Tom Savini acting in Dawn of the Dead, and he's actually played quite a few minor roles in movies he's worked on throughout the years, but perhaps my favorite acting performance from Mr. Savini would come in 1996's From Dusk Till Dawn. In my opinion, From Dusk Till Dawn might be the greatest vampire film of all time, and while Savini isn't a super vital character to the story of that film, my god does he chew up the scenery every time he is on screen. Sex Machine was and is an iconic side character in my book. Even to this day, Tom Savini is still impacting the horror landscape. Recently he crafted the mask that was used in both Black Phone movies. And as far as modern slasher/horror antagonist figures go, this mask kicks some serious ass. And it just goes to show that Mr. Savini is still at the top of the horror special effects game. Because horror is a genre that is built on scaring its viewers, I think makeup effects artists such as Tom Savini get criminally underrated and overlooked. By making gore that looks so realistic, you immediately establish that vital sense of realism that can make or break a genre film such as a slasher or a zombie flick. And every single project that Savini graced with his presence is the better for it. So from the bottom of my heart, Tom Savini, thank you for all you've done. And thank you for all the nightmares that your beautiful effects have given me over the years. Well, if you made it this far, please let me know in the comments. What's your favorite Tom Savini movie? That could be one he directed, one he did makeup and practical effects for, or just one that he acted in. I'd personally pick Dawn of the Dead, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, please feel free to drop a like and subscribe for more Screen Stories content. I'll have a playlist with all of my horror-themed videos linked in the description, so you might just find something else you like. Until next time, peace.